Hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of our videocast on school board meetings. I'm Wade Pogany, Executive Director of the Associated School Boards of South Dakota. Today's topic is about open forums and how boards can hear information from the public and at the same time establish procedures for an orderly meeting. Joining me today is Dr. Randy Royer. Randy is the Director for Board Development at ASBSD. Thanks for joining me today, Randy.
Thank you.
You've been a school board member for many years before coming to ASBSD, so you've sat through many a board meeting.
Yes.
And heard from the public in those meetings. And school board meetings are regular; they meet every month or more. So when they meet, are they considered to be a public meeting, and can patrons come and speak to the board anytime? Talk about the public notion of a board meeting.
They're not public meetings. They are a meeting of the board in public, and there is a difference. Probably the best way to think about it is the public is really an observer of the board meeting. They're not participants unless they're invited or allowed to speak by the board chair.
Okay.
So they really have no business to address the board unless the board says it's okay, and specifically the board chair.
So in order to have some kind of a structure or order to the meeting, they can observe, but depending on the policy or the procedure of the board, they can address the board, but under certain conditions. Is that correct?
Certain conditions, most board meetings have an open forum or public to be heard section. Sometimes that's before the actual meeting itself. Depends on your policies. If you don't have a policy, the Associated School Boards does have a sample policy you can use, and many boards have used that as a template for their own policy, and then they've expanded on that.
Okay.
That I've seen.
And we all want a good relationship between our school board and our community. So we want to hear from the public. We want to get their input. So when you're developing such a procedure or an open forum policy, can you give us some tips that boards should consider when they're thinking about having that time for the public to address them?
Well, our sample policy talks about a request to speak, either orally or written. And I've seen where boards will have like a half-sheet card where the patron can put down contact information as well as their issue that they want to address to the board. And what that does is gives the board as well as the administration contact information, so if they want to contact that person later on with some background information or results of whatever, they can do that, as well as the board chair can look at that and identify the issue that they're going to hear about from the patron. It's a great tool. Beyond that, the policies again should dictate how the public can be heard. Some board policies limit the number of people that can speak on one issue, or the amount of time, 3 to 5 minutes, that any patron can address the board.
Because you want to maintain that order, at the same time you want to let the patrons be heard.
Exactly. It is the board's meeting.
Right.
They're in charge. The chair is in charge. And as long as everybody understands that, I think it's good.
What would a board do if a patron came and addressed the board using the procedures that you've outlined, and they wanted the board to take action on something immediately, but it isn't on the agenda? What would you tell them?
Well, first of all, if the agenda's already been set, you can't go back and amend it. It's already been set now, and we're going to follow this agenda. As a board member, I would request more time to research the issue and get some more background information, and then put it on the next meeting agenda if it's appropriate.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And when a patron addresses the board, can they talk about anything that they want to, or are there certain limits in terms of what can be discussed in public?
There are certain limits. Certainly employee issues, teachers, administration by name is prohibited, as well as students. It cannot be named. And that's really state and or federal law that prohibits that. It's not just board policy.
And the president really would be in charge of conducting and determining, what's appropriate and not appropriate in that case.
Exactly. The chair is in charge of the meeting, and if there is a violation of that, the chair has every right to terminate that patron's input to the board.
So your recommendation for school boards then is that for open forums, we should really have a policy in place that governs when patrons can come and visit with the board.
Absolutely, and I would probably have that printed so when patrons come to a meeting, here's the protocol to address the board, and these are things you can and cannot talk about, and so it's clearly stated, and so they understand how to give input to the board. Board should welcome that input as well, but it should be clearly controlled and channeled by the board chair.
And in the end, really, we get a better relationship with our community because the board hears the information they need to hear and the community has a chance to voice their concerns.
Exactly, and it also gives the appearance that it's a professional organization and the appreciation for the board's work.
Great. Well, thanks for joining me today, Randy. That was great. And thank you for joining us.